There we are. We're streaming. We're streaming all the right places. We got Lloyd. We got Lloyd in the house. Lloyd Brown with Refined Completions. This is your show, Lloyd. Why wells fail. How you doing, brother?
I'm good. Just got back from spending 3 days in Montana, having a wonderful time chasing native trout. A lot of fun.
Native trout, huh?
Exactly.
Do they get out of the water and run to the other? Yep.
You don't. No, but it was a lot of fun. Beautiful, beautiful country.
Well, excellent. So in this conversation today, we're going to talk about, when we're working with all these variables downhole and we're trying to produce birth wells that are healthy and that return carbon fast and powerful, but there's a lot of variables at play. And so the refined process has a very specific process to determine which variable needs attention. Why is this important?
Well, when you're doing a scientific method, and something that we've learned over the years, and actually we're taught this by one of my partners today that used to be a customer. He was really a stickler for saying we're going to change one of these variables at a time, because if we do more than one, how do we know which one made the impact, positive or negative, right? And so that's one of the main things you want to do is you want to make sure that you know what you're going to measure, and to measure impacts. Production's important. It's like Zig Ziglar used to say, money's not everything, but I'd like to see you live without it. Well, initial production's not everything, but again, I'd like to see you live without it, right? You've got to get to where a well is producing economically. But to do that, we need to make sure that when we're making changes in the process of completing a well, that we do one significant change at a time, because there's always variables, right? But there are decisions, there are ways that we do things that are not variables. And those are the ones that we're talking about, making one significant change when we're evaluating whether or not a process and or a chemistry or series of chemistries make a difference.
So in the refined process, obviously some of these variables have already been addressed by analyzing the rock, analyzing the area. There's a lot of things you've already kind of worked through. But what I'm curious about is, in groups, you probably have these groups of variables. How do you prioritize those, and how do you walk through them in a timely way that makes it rewarding for the folks that are waiting for the process to vet out?
Well, the least or the lowest risk you have is to do it in your laboratory process first, right? And again, same thing as if we're going to go implement it in a completion process. We're going to make those analytical measurements one component, one chemistry, one method at a time. And so to have something that is that you can track over time, you've really got to do it through that method. So that's what we do in the laboratory, so we can get and look at, all right, this is our standard, and then measure the changes against the standard. And the standard's always going to be the water source and the geology. Those are the two things that we don't change during the process of the evaluation. But then the next thing that we do is what are the chemical or chemistry changes that we make in that fluid when we put it on the rock, and what's the difference? Same thing happens when we go into completing a well. We need to make sure that the amount of sand that they're putting in, the volumes of water, all the things for the geology when you're doing an evaluation, that those methods, those practices are the same. They're a constant. And then the only thing that we're tweaking is the process that we chose, the additives, to go on to suppress disruption, bring us into dynamic equilibrium, and producing the most effective wells that we possibly can that have the lowest long-term operating cost, along with the highest recoverable hydrocarbons over time.
You know, while you're talking, I'm thinking of, you hear these coaches talking about designing a game plan for the game. And when I was playing football myself in high school, I couldn't understand how a game plan it was going to help, because everything's in flux, right? You just think things are going to happen that you can't predict, and it didn't make much sense to me. But now I'm thinking about, this is the same thinking here, is that we're going to go in, we're going to control the game in this way, but we've got certain variables that we'll have to work through in some priority to get to the equilibrium that's dynamic, right?
That's right.
You go from static to the all of a sudden going, and we're gonna balance these two tensions and get to a perfect rhythm that's profitable. When did this this kind of came to you after observing many things, but this is not a common practice in your industry. Most of it's not.
Well, it's not. And it's, it depends how many wells you're completing, right? If you've got a package of 6 and this is your only shot over a year's time frame, it's hard to dedicate one to changing a process. But it really, ultimately, it's making a decision. And that's our job. Our role is to give confidence in the decision, because the process that we went through to make that recommendation, that change, is the intellectual capital that we bring to the relationship to reduce and eliminate, to provide more of a known of what the change is going to be able to produce. And that's, again, we track that by looking not only at the production, but what does the water tell us? And was the change, the one change, did it make a incremental step that we believe that it will?
There's a lot of variables at play. So we're watching the water as it comes back and what it's telling us, and we're able to test and adjust. And this is a patented process, right?
That is correct. And as of last week, we actually have our European patent number, which was exciting that we received that. We had received our notice that the patent was approved, but it's not official until you get that number. And so that was really, we get to use the word patented behind everything now.
Yeah. But there's a lot behind the patent, and that's proving your process. You've got great case studies. You're learning. This is an adjustable. Everything is a lesson. But when you communicate this, how do you build confidence in the team that you're working with when you begin this process?
Well, the confidence is through just developing a relationship. You know, one thing that I'm continuing to learn is how do you build trust fast? And the answer is, for many people, I'm pretty easy to give trust. And that's been really good, worked well in my life, but it's been painful at times too. And in business, where you're evaluating every day and a decision can significantly impact the performance of a company for a very long time, the taking our clients through this process is really about building the relationships, creating the opportunity for a very large amount of information sharing, but walking through and understanding the why, and then ultimately understanding the process of how we do things. And it's not something that needs to be hurried. And some, it's really cool when you visit with somebody that's been on the journey and you give them the one thing that they couldn't see. Those type of clients tend to make a transition much quicker. That have been students just like we have for a lot of their career, and have been constantly going, why this doesn't make sense, this doesn't make sense, and we're able to introduce uncommon sense that makes common sense. I know that that's kind of an oxymoron, but it's true because it's not a common practice. So the things that we're doing that are common practice, we're going against that with and showing the uncommon sense that says why this belief or understanding, we now don't believe the world's flat, we believe it's round. It's that same kind of situation that we're in.
The way I see it, this process that you guys do, you have this very deliberate business process on the front end, arranging capital, looking at the land, setting up all of that. Then we're going to get this well producing, and then we're going to go on to the other stages. But it seems like there's just been kind of a best guess that happens in what we're going to put down hold to optimize production of this well. And then you guys bring a deliberate business process, which if someone taking a little bit of time, they can gain confidence because this is congruent with the way they run their business anyway.
Exactly. And I think the big takeaway is understanding the economics of the well from the beginning through its life cycle. And that's with my experience and my partner's experience, we've all been in from the only part of the process of completing well. I've not physically worked in the drilling component, but from every part thereafter, I've been involved in the production, the completion of the well, the production of the well, the transportation of the finished goods, either to the refining, and then even in I've worked a number of years in refineries along with finished fuels. So we've got this expansive understanding of the consequences of starting off poorly. And when you do that, you've got to do a lot of things that have impacts along the life of this well and the product that's produced, and increases the input cost to get that barrel out of the ground. And so holistically, we think about what can we do to make this the most economically effective and efficient well from the things that we're impacting in working with our client. Because it's great to do a well that really produces a lot of hydrocarbon right off the bat. But if it drops off like a rock and it has a lot of operating cost problems, scale, corrosion, paraffin, and those things we did not proactively mitigate, then those are costs that well has for the rest of its life.
And these impact all the other areas too, the maintenance of the well
it's the law of compounding, and we understand the impacts, the compounding impacts of focusing on doing it right versus, and I hate to use the word right, but what we've learned, right? I don't want to sit here and go, we're right. Mm-hmm. But this is what we've learned, and this is the impact of what we learned. And by the way, this is what the science says about it. And the scientific world, through the form of a process patent, has agreed with us.
Then the case studies agree with you as well.
That's correct.
Talk to us a little bit about that. Some of the impacts are pretty significant. I was blown away last week when you mentioned a certain number, but go ahead and.
Well, the largest study that we've done to date included 10 wells in 2 different target zones. And in those, the uplift per well over a 2-year period for a sprayberry target zone was about right under $4 million per well per year. In a Wolfcamp B target zone, the impact was just north of $5 million and per well. And that was really a beneficial test because it happened in 2022, and we updated our numbers from that comparison in January of 25, and it's ongoing. But there was just so many things that we're able to show over more than just a 2-well trial, and then adding multiple target zones that give you the ability to see that process that impacts them at play.
It's crazy. So these variables that we're monitoring, we're going through them in priority. After the well gets to producing, like these wells that you're mentioning, you're still monitoring to some extent, right?
At a minimum, a monthly basis, yes.
And so now are the variables that we're monitoring, they're whittled down some, or in kind of a zone, and we're just keep an eye on certain things?
Well, it's funny. The ones that we've brought into dynamic equilibrium, the variables are very tight. The ones that are not in dynamic equilibrium, that stay in disruption, and this goes to our patent, we still see the changes. We see it's like it's a pulsing within the well, which is part of what we discovered in our patent, that there's a release of CO2 and H2S, and a cyclical pattern. So it just keeps itself going. It's kind of like a gyroscope, or in some ways a recharging battery.
So this would be, even though they've gone through the refined process, they're still very, very
not in our process. No, the wells that didn't follow our process
Gotcha.
have the pulsing. The refined wells stay because they never, we got them into dynamic equilibrium and they never came out.
Mm-hmm.
And you see it in the water. You see the change. You see it in the amount of CO2 and H2S that's produced over time. But the first place you see it is in the water. So it's really it's amazing, and to be able to take that over. Now we're at a 3-year mark from when those wells came on.
You talk about this dynamic equilibrium stage. My mind goes to how you have balance a tire, and a tire out of balance, it wears more, it rides rough.
Great example.
Yeah.
Or out of alignment, out of balance, out of alignment. The one that's out of balance really creates havoc mechanically, right?
Mm-hmm.
Impacts the ability, the control, the wear, but it and then one out of alignment really creates a whole nother set of issues. And so it's a great example that you just brought there, Steve, because that's one thing. We're bringing things into alliance, but we're keeping them in balance, mm-hmm. or in alignment, and we're keeping them in balance. You can, and many times today, what we've learned are some companies' processes have been intentional to get the disruption because they believe that's the way that they were able to get the most hydrocarbon. And many times it is for a very short period of time. But then the wear and tear that happens has that compounding consequence. So I'm going to use that one. That's really good.
Well, you think about it, that balancing aspect, it affects the shocks, it impacts the steering and braking, it's a detail that gives you a comprehensive benefit. And that's what your refine process feels like to me. Is not we're not just figuring out what to pour down that hole. We're maintaining the health of all the pipeline afterwards. We're maintaining the relationships and the reputation of the company because their wells are producing better. It's a very comprehensive impact from this refine process. Yeah,
That's correct. That's it. And it comes down, if you're doing it at a very lean, if you're using a process that is not worried about managing the disruption and bringing it back to dynamic equilibrium, it'll cost you less to produce that well to start out, but the lifelong compounding impacts of the problem that it has will dwarf if you'd have made that small investment up front. So, the old saying, you pay me now or you pay me later.
mm-hmm.
In this, it's better to make that investment. And we can show the economics on it. It's powerful, but it's better to make the investment from a capital expense. And oil and gas has some more favorable tax efficiency to do things from a capital expense versus than having it as an operating expense. And so there's a real, and every operator I've interviewed, all of them have said to me, without exception, that it's better to make a capital investment that lowers and makes your operating expense more predictable over time. And that's what our process does.
Your patented process.
Our patented process.
What's the thing what's come out of this that you didn't expect that you're really excited about? There's this affirmation that you get this idea, you see a vision, and you start to you get in there and you fight and then you wrestle it, and then it starts to evolve, and you're like, wow, this is really impactful. But there's this thing that kind of wasn't unknown that you're excited about, that you didn't expect. What would that be?
I think I'm not excited about nothing that's really been unexpected. I'm pretty big. I'm a big picture thinker. And so, but the thing that I'm very excited about, I'll use that word, is the level of scrutiny that this process patent has gone through and has come through with no prior art, that there's not anybody in the world that has documented the things that we have, and in the form of going through a creating something that could be found by the patent examiners. And that's really, it's exciting, but it also raises the most daunting question. If nobody else has thought about it, you've now got to go and take your time to explain what you've learned.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing that I really did not anticipate 15, 16 months into this new venture is the need to take time and be slow and intentional, just like the process was to get to the finish line. With getting the patent issued, we need to have that same mentality on getting it introduced into the marketplace in a more commercial way. And that excites me because, me, I love to teach.
Yeah. Well, what's exciting there is like AI has brought these to forefront, these expectations that you can have now that you couldn't have had before. And this is basically a similar experience with your operators. They can go, wow, we can actually have this expectation that we used to just think we got to guess real good at this stage. Hopefully we're going to have that best guess. But now we've got a theory that we can.
But see, it's more than a theory. I mean, we have a constant that we can measure the impact and the balance of disruption, and it's through a natural law. I mean, so that's not theory. But we couldn't patent the natural law, but we discovered it, we utilize it, and now it gives us the ability to do the mathematical work that we need to do to say, yes, we've got it in dynamic equilibrium, or we do not. It's still in disruption, and it's going to give us problems for the life of the well.
So look at you. You got to go in now and you got to disrupt the thinking process and the way the operators operate. Okay. Introduce.
I don't think it's disrupting. I think, that, Steve, that's kind of a like, let's rumble. And I love to rumble about ideas, but it's just introducing to and saying, hey, you thought this was blue, but it's really red. And let me show you. Let's just take a pair of glasses and let me show you what I've learned. It's more about helping correct vision than it is disrupting.
But where I was going with that, you're bringing in a dynamic equilibrium in a business process from beginning to start. Where this, to me, I'm not in your industry, but it seems like there was a disconnect. Where, all right, at this stage, we're going to go with our gut on best guesses, and then we'll get back to the business process. And you're coming in and going, hey, we got a piece that completes this journey of a process, a business process.
Absolutely. And the financial guys like it because it's mathematical, right?
Yeah.
What we say it's going to do in the laboratory actually happens with the well in the field. And when there's a disconnect between the two, we have the ability to go study it and learn more.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other side of the equation is if you don't have the constant that we have in our equation, you can't go back and do a post analysis and really go, okay, we missed this, or this change impacted it in this way. We don't need to do that again. And so it takes out the guessing of what caused a benefit or detriment. It really gives you the ability to say and do a proper case study or, rear view look and really not have to guess at what you're seeing.
I was reading an article on AI in the medical field where AI can help read labs or images, and remove the bias of the doctor,
Mm-hmm.
where they might miss something or not recognize, and it improves the outcomes, and your process feels similar, that we're removing some bias.
And it's funny you bring that. We've taken and loaded immense amounts of data that we gathered over the last 14, 15, 16 years, the vast majority of it within the last 10 or 11, and utilized AI to go back and pull our constant out of all of these samples so we can, and understanding the differences from what we've seen. And again, that gives us the ability in a rear view mirror, because we were doing some things right. We just didn't know why.
Mm.
And now we know why. Now we're able to validate it. And we went from hoping that we would bring about a positive impact to now we know that we have that ability.
So what would be a perfect project? Give me an example of a project you'd like to work on next. What if that person's listening and
it all starts on the bit, if we're able to get a sample from the wellbore, we can walk through and teach and discuss and discover what happened within that wellbore. And, we'd love to start, 300 or 400 feet before we get into the curve. So that's going to give us that upper section that we'll be fracking into, and understanding what that geology really looks like, and getting a really good stratigraphic profile along the length of the lateral. And we're able to do the science on that and see if we transitioned, we've stayed in target zone. If we've got something that we come across that there's a fault or an intrusion that we didn't expect, and that's the best way to go about. That's a perfect project, is just one that's about to be drilled.
how long does it take to start to have insights?
Once we get the samples, assuming that they've been taken by a mud logger and they're clean and ready to go, we can turn around a protocol in less than 2 weeks. If we're just getting buckets of different depths that are not cleaned, and we've got to clean and pull the cuttings out and clean the mud off, and depending on what type of drilling fluid they use, that's a minimum of adding a week to the process, usually 2, because it's very labor intensive.
Wow. All right, Lloyd. So if they want to contact you, they got more questions, talk about this, what's the next step?
Lloyd.brown@refinedcompletions.com, or refinedcompletions.com, and hit the button and have them reach out.
All right, perfect. And so, subscribe, send us some questions. If you're struggling with the questions I'm answering, well, ask and give me some, so I can lead the conversation good here. Lloyd's doing awesome.
And that would be something I'd just say, hey, if there's something that a person that's listening to this wants us to go deeper, that would be wonderful to have, because we want to talk about relevant topics that our listeners are there, and go deeper into those. And so, that would be cool.
All right, Lloyd, good job. Why wells fail. So many variables to address. Let's go through them in a process, the refine process, to get you producing the way that you're supposed to. We'll see you guys next week on Why Wells Fail, same time. Have a great week, Lloyd.
Thanks, Steve.